What's up, everybody? OpenTHC uses Docker, and I love Docker. Docker is very cool, and it allows us to deploy a whole bunch of moderately complicated services, sort of, I guess, sort of all at once, right? So for our environment, we've got to run a database server. We run a Redis server for caching. There is another service called OPA that needs to run to keep our universe in a happy state. We have a single sign-on kind of like endpoint for the other services to depend on, and then we actually have the services that people want to run, the seed to sale application, the POS application, those other front-end toolkits. And well, it's a little complicated, so we throw a bunch of this stuff together in Docker, and all those containers get to run. And out of the box, what we had been doing was using, let's share my screen here so everybody can see what I'm on about. So initially, we were using these bits right here for this toolkit called Traefik. And Traefik is very, very cool. And Traefik allowed us to do interesting stuff, interesting stuff that mattered. Like we could do openthc.me. And if you were using our Docker Compose up locally, right, on your own workstation, then this website, openthc.me, well, that's on the internet. But these other container services that you'd want, those are running on your local host. And so going to something like openthc.me would let you get in there. I don't have any services running, so naturally it's not working for me. But this was complicated, is a little complicated, because what if you want to run it on your own infrastructure? Ooh, it's a kind of a pain. And then you got to figure out your own DNS and change your own DNS and fiddle with all that. And then you've got to, reconfigure some of these services and whatnot. And I had made some attempts to do that, but with Traefik, it was also difficult to get the SSL part enabled. And I have a friend who's like, oh man, you got to just get on Caddy. Caddy's the best for like everything. Why aren't you using Caddy, you dumbass? Okay, so let's look at switching this over to running with Caddy. And Caddy is very similar to Traefik, let's say. It can function as a reverse proxy, which is very much what a lot of Traefik is doing right here. Traefik does this thing, and when Traefik is the one endpoint that's listening outside from Docker, when it receives some traffic, then it's all smart enough to know, because we've got these interesting labels that we've made up to tell Traefik, oh, HTTP router to SSO, the rule is if the host is called sso.openthc.me, then this is who it should go to, and all of these words match up, SSO, and they can talk to each other through this Docker socket, and all of that stuff works nice. And it's very cool, very, very cool if you have a dynamic configuration. That is to say, traffic is at the edge of your network, and then the services and whatnot behind it are moving around and wiggling. And this happens if you're a bigger company than a single or two location like cannabis business, where your infrastructure is largely static. When I say things are moving around a whole lot, I mean look at a larger tens or hundreds of thousands of users per hour type of website. Well, they'll have something at the edge like Traefik, and then behind it there's going to be another service where there's the actual application server for the web traffic. Well, they're going to move those things around as servers die and servers come online, and maybe they do an upgrade. And the way they do an upgrade is they just use Traefik and route all our new traffic to the new host, and we sort of shunt off the traffic from the old host, and now the new one's live, and the old one's not getting any traffic, and then we can fiddle with it. There's lots of this happening, and it's fairly complicated kind of stuff. Drives the internet all over the fucking place on the internet. Excuse my French. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just kill all of that stuff. And that endpoint, in that edge of our Docker universe, we have been calling hub. So I'm going to put it back in. I'm going to call it hub. Container name is going to be the same as it was before, hub.openthc.me. And actually, we're going to have to come back and change this in a second. But I'm building this as if it was the .me environment first. My image is Caddy. And Caddy is going to get 2 ports because it needs port 80 for the normal old boring ass HTTP traffic, and it needs 443 for all of the SSL related traffic. And then we are going to have to do 2 little bits here, and I'm just going to do this sort of a sloppy way. We need to get a Caddy file into the Caddy configuration so that it knows what it's doing. So that's this. And then when Caddy runs, it will be one of the cool features it does is automatically configures the SSL for you based on all the stuff that's configured in the Caddy file. It's pretty damn cool stuff. And so we need to persist that data so that if you restart your Caddy server, it's not going to go out and fetch new SSL certificates every time you run. If you're only rebooting like once every restarting the services every 15 days, that's probably okay. But if you're in the process of like iterating and getting it started, and every time you turn it on, it's like, oh, I don't have a certificate for the app service, it's going to go and fetch it from Let's Encrypt. And we don't want to put any additional load on those services if we don't have to. So we're going to have a little volume that's going to stay here and stick around while we do this. And then here's where the fun magic happens. Let's see if I can't find the other bits. Oh, yes, I have them here in 2 different things. I'm doing a Caddy test. It's largely the same, but trimmed down a little. So let's go and look at this one. This is what we want it to do here. Yes, that's great. So on this one, I'm going to run Caddy, and I'm routing everything to the special hosts.internal. And you might have to do something like that depending on how yours is running. In this environment, this Caddy container is already going to know the host names of all of these other services because they all exist inside of like the same Docker network. So if this inside here and you say, oh, well, let me talk to SSO, it's going to know where SSO is. And we're going to mount in this Caddy file. And I had to make 2 different Caddy files here for various reasons. And this one is I turned on a whole bunch of logging and I want my metrics. And this is what runs at the edge of my network. And I have this is my environment, by the way, my domain, demo.openthc.com. I got demo, I have SSO, a bunch of other stuff that we run that's all commented out just for the sake. I have app, I have POS, and you can see that this external Caddy file is just reverse proxying to people, to services inside. And so if they're inside of the thing, you can probably leave the word .internal off there. But just for example, on this thing that I'm putting together, we're going to be using app.internal. And then this is my Caddy internal file. And let's turn on its Caddy file design. I turned on internally, auto HTTPS is off. And so this is the Caddy file that's for each of the services. I have a slightly different setup where all these services are sort of running bare metal and not in the container, which is why I'm taking these a little weirder steps right here. But for everybody else, you would have a Caddy file that is basically this, just this, and then only one site. But it gets kind of fun in here because you got to say auto HTTPS off. Maybe you don't have to change the bind point. You would want to change maybe the HTTP port, but not super critical when you're in the container, again, because of my mixed configuration. I'm using port 80 and this weird IP for these internal ones. And then you want to make sure that this is set to HTTP so that Caddy knows that you're only doing that. And then even though this is internal, the host name that you put in here is the external host name. So when external Caddy receives the request at the edge of your network and then forwards to the Caddy that is running in the actual container that's running the web app service, then these names got to match, and they'll be configured to some directory and they'll be doing their silly things. And it's same for this. Again, in the Docker universe, each service will have a single Caddy configuration file. So we're ready to rock and roll. And that's what we do when we run these business. And then let's see if we can't just, you know, what if I can embarrass myself in real time, just trying to find the tab that has the connection to that host. Here you are. So if I go back to my Docker test directory, see what do I have running? I already have a Caddy running, it looks like, on this machine. So let's get ourselves another little demo browser. So here's the logs from my external Caddy, and then like here's the web server. And so I would just hit like refresh on demo because this is my demo page and it routes me into all of my stuff. And I should be able to go to the SSO site, and you can see the traffic's getting hit right here. And here I am on sso.demo, which is being served off of the internal SSO thing from Caddy at the outside. And we've got good connection is secure. That's what I wanted. We've got a thing. Certificate is valid. Where did it come from? Just this host name. I don't know. That's something, but Let's Encrypt hooked me up. This is the Let's Encrypt SSL free Acme services. And then you would just sign in and do whatever it is that you need to do. And I feel like the other services all should be running reasonably well. Looks like they are. And there's the logs in my Caddy. So flipping over to this, turns out it was like pretty flippin' easy to just take the step, Docker GitHub. And we look at the difference. Well, I've just switched my hub name from Traefik to Caddy. I'm doing both ports on it now because it's just thinking that's how the universe is. And I've changed my config here to, instead of loading a Traefik config or having a dynamic Traefik config, I just do that and I persist my Caddy data somewhere. The other thing I'll be able to do in these configs is when I get down here, these labels that I had mental struggles with these labels. You know, they were just like, I'm looking at them and I go, oh, they're in my way. And what are they doing? And where are they supposed to be? And why are they here? And what are the valid rules for them? You know, there was a lot of work in my brain to try to get my head around what these things are doing. And this thing is going to have to depend on hub, not Traefik anymore. So I forgot to change that. Let's just see, where else do I have the word Traefik in here? That's now hub. And then if we look at the diff now, pretty easy. Hub, images, Caddy, something, something. Swap those out to say hub, 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 hub. Everything is pretty tidy right there. Now, this does still, out of the box, you know, on our GitHub, it's still saying hub.openthc.me. And this is still saying SQL.openthc.me. And the openthc.me universe is sort of like, well, that's our reserved universe. And so you shouldn't be using those names for your world, right? You should be using those. You should be using your own host name, right? Like whatever your cannabis company name happens to be. That's the one you should be using. And so what I would tell somebody to do in that situation is get your new server wherever this is going to run dialed in, learn wherever it is you're going to have your learn wherever it is you're going to put your public IP, right? So like if you're in Amazon or some other cloud service providers, you might have one or more nodes running in the system, but they have a different public IP than like what IP address the machine has, because they do virtual network routing and all kinds of other fun stuff. Again, there's servers in front of servers in front of servers, all these devices that your traffic is passing through on the way from the mobile phone all the way to the server that actually answers, you know, that request, or servers more than likely. And so you would change all of these .me's to be your company name or something like that. So let's just take a quick look at this thing and say, oh, yes, I like how all of that goes. And maybe I should end up, getting that committed. And I will end up doing that. You know what? I mean, fuck it, man. I'm here. I might as well just do the commit right now. Get hub. What am I looking for? Oh, compose.yaml. OpenTHC, full Docker environment. We'll see how bad this is. So I got new hub. I'm doing both ports now. That looks good. So we'll put that in play. So we also have to have our Caddy file external, which will be yours. And I have these all set to openthc.com. These would be out of the box, being things like, you wouldn't have demo, but you would have sso.openthc.me. So everywhere where I've got something like demo.openthc.com, that's where you would change it to, I think you should change it to like service name, SSO, sso.openthc.company.com. And I'll just put those in big caps so it's easy to like see them. And you'd have openthc.company.com. And then when you go into your compose file and you have these container names with .me, you can leave all of those container names with openthc.me like dialed in, no problemo. All these ones that say .internal really don't need to be there saying .internal. They can just say the regular host name. And these ones I have them all routed to port 8080 because my current configuration had some internal stuff not all the way dialed in the same. We're clicking around on one of my demo systems. It's got like other work in progress, sort of going on in that environment that we're testing out against. So these would have the same regular old name. And then when you go to one of those other services, they've got to get where they're getting a config copied in. You'd have to do another one where you're basically going to take something like Etsy app Caddy file and mount it into Etsy Caddy file in this container. And then you're ready to, and actually you don't need this one anymore. That goes away. And so then you would have this. And then in this Caddy file for the service is where you'd have to go in and change it so that it is showing you, the proper host name, whatever your host name is. Again, the container name can stay like this. You might want to also put your own default aliases in here so that SSO is known in your Docker container as sso.openthc.company.com. And this way everybody can kind of see everybody else and talk to everybody else and send traffic to everybody else inside of the container network, but also like outside of the container network. If you have these aliases properly configured in your DNS, you don't need to do any of that. And you can just leave these names as these .me's in here and just change the external Caddy file so that it's, what's the word I'm looking for? Gives you what you want. Let's see who's got a good example. I think SSO has an old one. SSO has an old one. Yeah, openthc.example.com. So this is that file. When you changed it, you would go into this one and change it to company.com. And then when this thing starts running, it's going to be able to respond to your hosting, and everything will be awesome. So anyways, that, I hope, might have taken a little bit of time here. Gives a pretty okay explanation of like how Caddy works and what values you got to fiddle with in these various config files to change it for your own hosting. You're going to have to control your own DNS. You're going to have to control your server. You're going to have to know your public IP address. You're going to have to edit a couple of YAML files. But after that, and fiddling with it, you know, getting the config dialed in, ready to rock and roll. And all the stuff will be like persistent and good and happy, and you will really enjoy it. So thanks for hanging out with me for the last like 20 some odd minutes talking about Traefik and Caddy and flipping from one to the other in the OpenTHC universe, sort of just an educational thing. But then also, now that we're on Caddy, it's a little bit easier to configure it for your own domain, which should make your deployments a little bit easier. Thanks.